Welcome to the Friday Happy Hour with victory strategist, award-winning author and your happy hour host, Annmarie Kelly. Each week, Annmarie chats with women who have reinvented, started over or wrote fabulous next chapters. They share how they overcame their midlife challenges and how you can too. So kick back with some good happy hour something to drink and enjoy today's show.
Hi and welcome. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour with me, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm that recovering good girl and your victorious woman empowerment partner. And you know, this is where us victory chicks and you men who care about us meet on Fridays to chat about things that make us overcome our challenges, get empowered, and make our lives sparkle. Thanks for coming to Happy Hour. Have you ever had a near-death experience? Well, our guest today did. She's Dr. Neal. And her near-death experience happened on a kayaking trip in Chile. She has some really interesting things to say about what happened to her, and I have some good questions for her. So Dr. Neal is going to be here in just a few minutes. And talking about some scary experiences, I had that kind of a week, and not because of Halloween. It was on Tuesday, it was Halloween, that things took a scary turn. Here's what happened. I was on my way to an appointment in Wayne. I left Westchester and all was normal, but shortly after I got onto the 202 highway, and you know what a treat that road is, something felt funky with my car. At first I couldn't quite figure out what it was, but then I started to realize I drive stick shift. I think I'm losing my sixth gear. So as my mind was trying to adjust to that, and you know, I'm thinking, can I drive without a sixth gear? And I know I can slide through a gear, but I was thinking, can I still get to my appointment? Okay, I'll just get to my appointment, then I'll call AAA when I get there. And like I was kind of going through all those little things in my head, and I'm wondering if I had the client's phone number, all that. I realized it wasn't just sixth gear. I lost all the gears. So, for those of you who know 202, going towards King of Prussia, you know where the construction goes over that small bridge? Well, it's not actually a bridge, it's the overpass for Route 30 in Fraser. Do you know what I mean? Where the lanes split and the road goes slightly downhill. Well, actually, I never actually realized the downhill part until Tuesday, and then I was really glad for it because if I would have had to do anything uphill, I would have been up a creek. I had no gears to do it with, and I'm really not sure what would have happened. But as it was, I was coasting along 202 and wondering if I should pull off to the side, which, you know, is never a good thing on that highway, and also wondering how far it was to the next exit. So did you ever notice that when you're nervous and everything you know just goes right out of your head? Daniel Goleman, who wrote that book, and he was the emotional intelligence guy, the way he said it was, stress makes you stupid. Well, in my car on Tuesday, stupid was on display. It's only temporary, but here's the thing. I drive that road regularly. My office is right off the Devon Park Drive exit it's right near where the expressway exit is. And I know that section of 202 like the back of my hand. Or at least until Tuesday, I thought I did. But it turns out stress made me stupid. Because as I was coasting along in the far right lane, I couldn't even think what the next exit was or how far I was from it. All I could think was that there had to be one soon. And which one was it? And should I pull over or take the chance and keep coasting? And of course I had my flashers on. But I discovered flashers mean nothing to drivers on that highway. They were tailgating, beeping, getting annoyed. I had my flashers on, for goodness sake. Did they think it was for Halloween tricks and treats? Well, then I called Joseph, who I caught just as he was getting ready to leave his office. And as I'm listening to him telling me to pull over, some big-ass truck zips past me and scares me even more. And I decided, should I take my chances at the exit? And I just couldn't remember how far. But happily, I saw the sign that indicated the 401 exit was 3/4 of a mile. And I thought, I think I can coast that far. And I did. I managed to get safely off the exit to the bottom. And frankly, I didn't know if that was a lot safer, but I knew it was better than being on the highway. So then I called AAA. I was talking to some guy who got my location and said he'd help. Then he started talking about cost and mileage and asking me money questions. I was a little more than stunned, and as I said, I was already doing stupid, and this guy wanted me to think about money. If I was younger, I might have answered his questions and tried to focus and, doing all those good girl things. But you victory chicks know. In midlife, we aren't so patient with nonsense. And as I was already not in the best of moods anyway, I snappily asked him if his job was to get money for AAA or get me the help I needed for the service for which I was paying annual dues. So now he was probably only doing what AAA told him to do, but I, his client, was scared and by myself. So I think I shook him up, and he got me the help I needed. I only had to wait, about 25 minutes until a very nice guy showed up and got my car onto his tow truck. But then here was the other thing. And I know any woman in midlife can appreciate this. By that time, I had to go to the bathroom. And you midlife guys know what it's like when your sweetie says she has to go. But when I told that young guy, he didn't quite get it. He was a little shocked when I told him we might have to pull off the next exit. I could almost hear him saying in his head, "You mean you can't hold it until we get there?" He didn't, and I appreciated that. And I managed until we got to the dealer. But then I discovered it was going to cost a minimum of $100 for them just to look at the car. And maybe more if they had to take the transmission out. Hello? And then they would tell me how much it would cost to repair the car. Hello? So since I plan to get another car before year's end, my cruise is still there, and I'm car shopping. And I got here today thanks to the kindness of WCHE's lovely Michelle. So, Michelle, thank you for picking me up and getting me to the Friday happy hour today. While all this was going on with me, I got an email from Joseph got an email from one of his therapists that the clothes dryer, where he's a massage therapist, so they have a lot of sheets. The clothes dryer was making a very loud noise and disturbing the clients. So for a split second, Joseph thought about having the dryer repaired, but like my car, it's old. He figured that it was going to be cheaper to get a new dryer, so he was out looking for that. I was out looking for a new car, and we're both trying to get our work done while we're shopping. And then to top it all off, the National League Dodgers lost the World Series in a pitiful last game of the series. But I had to give it to those Astros. Those guys played their hearts out. Hello? And they deserved to win. But I can't help myself. I'm still a National League girl. So I was disappointed. But I'm expecting that next October, it's going to be our Phillies that play in that series. Stop laughing. They could do it. Remember Tug McGraw? You got to believe. I believe.
You still there?
Of course, all that is nothing compared to the latest terrorist attack. Those people getting mowed down on the bike path in New York. And that was just awful. And the hospital was reporting that the terrorist is proud of himself and wants to fly an ISIS flag in his hospital room. Are the terrorists becoming even more emboldened? In what reality did he think they would fly the terrorist flag?
Hello?
Or is he going for an insanity defense? What bothers me the most about that is that one incident by one incident, we are becoming accustomed to terrorism in our backyards. New York's mayor and governor said the terrorists didn't win and the folks should go about doing what they do best, being New Yorkers. Well, that's good for everybody else except for the 8 people who were killed and the 11 people who were injured. I'm really curious to ask Dr. Mary Neal about that stuff because she has the inside scoop.
Mary Neal? Okay.
One that came from her own near-death experience. Dr. Neal says she wrote 7 lessons from heaven so she could share with you not only how her near-death experience made a difference in her life, but how it can make a difference in yours. She has some really good stuff to share with you, the kind of stuff that will make you so happy this Friday afternoon. So listen, go get some good happy hour something to drink and come back with me and Dr. Mary Neal. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Are you one of those women who lived the first part of your life as a really good girl? That is, you did all the right things and followed all the so-called rules for women? I was like that too. But have you noticed that once you passed 40, you have less patience for those rules? Maybe you even think that the rules really don't make sense for you anymore. Maybe they never did and you just didn't realize it. Do you want to go where other recovering good girls meet to inspire each other and support their new empowered selves? Then join me, Annmarie Kelly, and some very fabulous victorious women. We're on Facebook at the Victorious Woman Project. So go to facebook.com/Victorious Woman Project. I'll talk to you there.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm your Happy Hour host, Annmarie Kelly, and I'm here with Dr. Mary Neal. Glad you're here today, Mary.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, thank you. Mary, your new book, I love your books, but your new book, 7 Lessons from Heaven, How Dying Taught Me to Live a Joy-Filled Life, is your second book. Now, your first one, To Heaven and Back, tells what happened when you were on a kayaking vacation in 1999. Could you tell my listeners what happened?
Yes. In 1999, my husband and I went kayaking in Chile in South America, and it's a long story, but I inadvertently went over a waterfall and became pinned or stuck under 8 to 10 feet of water at its base. And I was underwater for 30 minutes. And during that 30 minutes, of course, it felt like many, many hours for me. But during those 30 minutes, I asked that God's will be done. I was enveloped with a very physical sensation of being held and comforted and reassured by Christ that everything would be fine. My husband would be fine. My 4 little kids would be fine, regardless of whether I lived or died. And that was really the beginning of this really profound and remarkable experience, not just for me, but for other people. And during that time, I went through a life review that had little to do with judgment and everything to do with God's incredible love and grace for us. And I learned what true grace really is. And I also was shown again and again and again that the truth in God's promise that beauty comes of all things, which I was shown again and again and again as we look back at events of my life. And then my spirit was sort of released up to heaven, and it was only then that I had the experience of being able to look back at the scene on the river and see the guys pull my body to shore and see them start CPR. And when that happened, I sort of looked at my body and recognized it as mine and said, okay, great, thank you, see you later, because I was overwhelmed with this sense of being home, of being where I really belonged and where we all ultimately really belong. And I wasn't planning on coming back.
Yeah, you didn't have a big interest in that. In spite of the spouse and the kids, you...
No, it's fascinating to me on a sort of an intellectual basis, because I had a great life. I mean, I had a wonderful, still do, have a wonderful husband, had 4 little kids that I cannot imagine loving more intensely on earth. And I had a good job, a family. I had no issues. I mean, life was good. I had every reason in the world to come back. But like basically every person I've talked to who's had a near-death experience, and at this point I've talked to many thousands of them, we all would say the same thing. We really didn't want to come back. There are some people who I've spoken with who chose to come back for some very specific reasons, but otherwise none of us would have chosen to come back, because when you experience the intensity of love on earth, it pales in comparison to the intensity of God's love. And it's our true home. I mean, coming to earth is this opportunity. So believe me, we all have work to do and we need to be about it. But this is our temporary home. This is just a stopping point.
Well, one of the things that fascinated me, Mary, was that when you realized you're an orthopedic surgeon, so you were conscious that you were in a bad place, and at one point that you were dead, and yet you prayed God's will be done. Now, you know what, Mary? I'm not sure that I could have. I just don't think if I knew I was in that space and I was underwater and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I guess I wouldn't have imagined that I would do that either. I mean, before this experience, I would have said that I was a Christian. I would have said that I believed in God, and I think maybe there's something more after death. But as I look back at myself during that time of my life, I would say that I'd been a pretty typical cultural Christian, meaning, sure, I took my kids to church, and I certainly bought into the idea of being a good person, being honest and ethical and that sort of thing. But that's very different from living one's faith. And I have to say that at that point in my life, I had not personally known anyone who died. I mean, I'd had patients or that sort of thing, but I'd never lost anyone I loved. And so I think, like most people, I'd never really thought much about death or dying or what that process would be with regard to me personally. I don't think we ever really think about it until we're faced with it. But I always thought drowning would be the most horrible, terrible way to die. And I was shocked, actually, to find that I never had a sense of panic. I never had a sense of fear or air hunger, all those things that you would assume that a drowning person would feel. I never had the sensation of being conscious and then unconscious. I had the sensation of being conscious and then more conscious. One of the things that I came to realize is I believe that God pulls us, meaning the real us, out of the reality of a situation before we feel fear or pain or any of those things. I think that we're sort of enveloped, and I came to understand that where God is present, where God's love is present, there really is no room for other destructive emotion like fear or anxiety or any of those things.
I'm sure you understand. It's hard for my conscious mind and for my listeners the ability to say, oh yeah, it's cool.
Well, I'll tell you it took a long time to get to this point, but what I have absolutely realized is that the ability to live in that state, which is part of this ability to live in a state of joy, has everything to do with trusting God's promises to us. And if you truly trust God's promises to us, then you really can imagine drowning and not feeling fear. Because we are promised that our past is gone. We are promised that there is a future for us. And we are promised that there is a God that loves us intensely. And if you truly accept those things, then the future is okay. I am still a planner for sure, but I hang on to all my plans very loosely because I know that if the plans I have made change, first of all, it's probably because God has a better plan for me, but I also have an absolute trust that God has a plan for me and for each of us that is one of hope. And it's really that trust that changes your ability to think about situations and think about them with terror or think about them with, okay, I'm game. It's an adventure. I mean, it's just a different mindset.
And you talk about that. You talk about trusting God implicitly with that absolute trust, but then you admit that we have obstacles to that trust. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a great one for those obstacles. And I'll bet many of my listeners are on the same page with that. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with those obstacles?
I think that, first of all, you have to recognize what your obstacles are. And for so many of us, there are some pretty common ones. One is that we don't really want to believe that it's true because for many people it's very inconvenient. If there really is a God who is real and present, has a plan for my life that's one of hope, well then I better get after it. I better figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing and do it, which may not be in line with what I want to do. And so a lot of us don't really want there to be a plan for our lives, even though we might talk about it. And even in terms of thinking about life after death, I think a lot of people don't necessarily want that to be true, because if they accept the truth of that, then again, it changes the importance of today, of every moment of today. The other obstacle I think is really, really common is that we let our past define us. We let the sorrows, the regrets, the feelings of shame, whatever it is in our past, we kind of don't really want to let go of those things because they're very comfortable. No matter how bad our past is, known is always more comfortable than the unknown. And for so many of us...
And there's that sense of protection, like if I remember it, then I'm safe.
Yes, exactly. But if we truly accept that our past is gone and our past does not need to define our present nor our future, then all of a sudden it's a little frightening, because we then become responsible for deciding, okay, who am I in this moment in time? I'm no longer held back by my past. I'm no longer in a family, you have the smart one, the athletic one, the pretty one, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you shed all of that and you try to imagine that, no, in this moment today, I am the person that God intends me to be, it's a little daunting sometimes. And I think it's much easier to hang on to our past. And so I think for many, many people, it's that hanging on to your past that prevents you from being fully present today. Because we like to hang on to, we're mad at that person, and, we don't really want to, not only do we not really want to forgive them, because then we have this sense of, well, that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, it's really difficult for us to have grace. And grace is sort of forgiveness in action, which means there's not a second part to the forgiveness. Because we talk about forgiveness and we say, well, I forgive you, but, and there's always a but, I want you to do this, or but, I'm not going to forget it. There's always a second part to that sentence. But when you talk about grace, and that's really what God offers us, when you talk about grace, it's complete. There's not a second part to that sentence. Grace means I understand what your backstory is. I understand my backstory. I understand that you have a backstory, even if I don't know the details, because you are the sum total at any moment of your past, all your hurts and sorrows and struggles. And it's your past that brings you to the moment where you hurt me or I hurt you. And grace means accepting that that is true and moving forward.
It's funny, Mary, that there was a woman I know who was recently in her late 70s. She had that word, grace, tattooed on her ankle.
Yeah.
And I saw her over the summer, and the first time that I saw her in shorts, and I looked and I said, why did you have grace tattooed onto your leg? And she gave me almost, not verbatim, but that same kind of thing. She said it's what we all need, and it has to do with that idea of not living in your past and working with forgiveness. And she had as good an explanation of it as you just gave me and my listeners. She had it, but she had it tattooed because it was something she didn't always remember.
Yeah, well, because it's so easy for us to fall into old patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the pattern of our culture. Our culture promotes this idea of, reward and punishment. But that's not really God's world. It's not. We don't earn God's love. We don't earn the grace. We don't earn any of it. We sure don't deserve it, which was one of the first really profound aspects of my experience, because I was being held and comforted by Christ, and I knew, I'd tried to be a good person, but believe me, I missed the mark every day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't deserve to be there. And that was remarkable because I knew that his presence, I knew that God's love is for all people, not just people who think they earn it.
Interesting. And Mary, we're going to go for a break, but when we come back, we have you in 7 Lessons from Heaven, you give your readers what you call a guided tour of heaven. Can we talk about that when we come back?
Sure.
That's great. So everybody stay close. You're going to love this. You're listening to the Friday Happy Hour.
Hi, this is Annmarie Kelly, author, victory strategist, and the radio show host of the Friday Happy Hour. I trust you're enjoying my conversation with this fabulous, victorious woman. If you're getting inspired with ideas and feeling empowered, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's more for you. Tips, downloads, resources at the Victorious Woman Project. Go to victoriouswoman.com and look around and get on my mailing list so you can be the first to know about the newest good things I have for you. That's www.victoriouswoman.com.
Welcome back to the Friday Happy Hour. I'm Annmarie Kelly. I'm here with Dr. Mary Neal. And Mary, I was so fascinated. I was saying to my producer during the break that your book brought me to tears more times than I can tell you. But you talk about this guided tour of heaven. So I'm really curious that you say there are no earthly words to describe the heavenly wonders. But here's what I'm curious about. Did your life pass before you?
Well, when I was still underwater, yes, we went through a life review. And that is the first of many remarkable experiences. And during that, as I was saying, it really had nothing to do with judgment. We would pull out an event from my life, and a couple things happened. One is that I not only re-experienced the event from everyone's perspective who was involved, but I almost became those people. As I was sort of alluding to earlier, I understood each person involved. I understood their backstory, and I understood this concept of grace. And it's interesting to me to look back at some of the episodes in my life where someone really hurt me. And I no longer, and at the time after this life review, I had no emotional reaction to them. It wasn't this emotional forgiveness. It was just grace. And in addition to that, I had the incredible opportunity of looking at the end result of those events, of the unseen ripple effects when looked at 25, 30, 35 times removed, and again and again and again was shown that beauty really did come from every single event.
Wow, that's as you're saying that, I'm thinking about times when in my younger self was not quite so understanding as maybe I am now, and I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I want to review all that stuff.
Well, no, but it's an incredible experience because it really has everything to do with love and grace, and even looking at the beauty that comes from all things. You can do that in your own life right now. You can always look back and say, oh my gosh, thank goodness I didn't end up with that boyfriend or that girlfriend. That would have been a disaster, even though at the time you might have been heartbroken. Or you can look back at a job that you either didn't get or you lost and be grateful because you could see how that set you up for an even better opportunity. And so we can all look back and see that. It's very difficult. The further in the past an event is, the more we're able to appreciate the beauty that came out of it because we're not so emotionally attached.
Oh, that's true. Yep, you're right.
But everyone can do that. And I think it's partly in doing that you begin to see the clear handprint of God in your life. Because I am absolutely convinced that God is present and active in every person's life, whether they know it or not, whether they want it or not, and whether they believe it or not. God's presence is there.
Well, and here's something else. When I was a kid in Catholic school, like, first or second grade, the nuns would talk about our guardian angels, and they would even say, I can remember, they used to tell us to leave room on our seats for our guardian angels next to us. So, Mary, do we really have guardian angels?
Well, I absolutely know that there is a spiritual crossover in that, yes, I believe angels do cross over into our world. I believe departed spirits or loved ones cross over. It's certainly not at our request. My oldest son died, and I can't say, hey, Willie, come help me find a parking spot. But there's no question that there is crossover at God's direction, and that crossover is oftentimes to bring a message of comfort, reassurance. I do think that there are angels that manifest in our world that do things for us, that help us in different ways. And it's a funny thing because I don't understand it for sure, but I know that in my own life, there are, in my life, even around this kayaking accident, there were clear examples of angels that came. They sort of appeared out of nowhere. They did what they were there to do, and then they just didn't exist. And so I have not only experienced it in my own life, but at this point I have spoken with hundreds of thousands of people who have had not just near-death experiences, but other really profound spiritual experiences. And you can't hear the same stories again and again and again and not believe there's something to them. And so I don't understand the angelic presence. I don't know if we each have one, although in the Bible it does talk about the guardian angels of children. But I absolutely know that our world is not separate from God's world, that we are within the midst of it. It's sort of like if we were living in a two-dimensional world, we wouldn't understand that we were part of a cube. And I sort of think that's my concept of our world and God's world. We're just sort of within it, but we don't have the vocabulary, we don't have the understanding to even recognize that we're within this incredible spiritual world.
Interesting. And I know in the book you call the angels couriers of warnings and guidance, and I think that's kind of a neat thing that we know that they're floating around someplace.
Right. I mean, they're around. People always ask, gee, do you think my loved ones still can see me or know what's going on in my life? And I will tell you that from my experience personally, I absolutely know that there's this ability to understand what's happening in our physical world. I know that, departed loved ones, spirits, whatever you want to call them, they have their own work to do. I don't know what it is, but I know that they're busy doing stuff also. Mm-hmm. And so they're not just hanging around here, with nothing else to do. But definitely there's this crossover. It's fascinating to me. I mean, it's certainly not something I would have believed prior to my own experiences and prior to talking to so many people. I definitely would have rolled my eyes and thought, oh, I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, but your fourth lesson is, and I think I took this right out of the book, that heaven is a reality in which you are made whole.
Yes. And
that one, I'll tell you why it really interested me, because I remember when my father died, and he was a wounded warrior who lost his left arm before I was born. I had a very powerful experience in a guided meditation. I was in a class and we were in guided meditation, and in that experience, I was walking with my father. We both had white robes on. I was walking with him, and he was holding my hand. And I remember thinking we weren't like the hand-holding kind of father and daughter. And I thought it was like so weird. And then it took me about 3 or 4 days to go over it over and over.
Right, to realize why.
Yeah, he was holding my right hand with his left, the hand that he never had.
Yeah.
So when I read your account in 7 Lessons from Heaven, you talk about that. You talk about being in white robes and things.
Yes. No, and in heaven, everyone is whole. There's no disease. There's no injury. There are none of those things. The other thing in terms of being whole is your relationships are whole. I talk to some people who say, well, if my father or whomever else is going to be there, I don't want to go there, because that guy's a son of a gun, and I never want to see him again in my life.
Yeah, I've thought that about a couple of people.
Yeah, exactly. But, again, it's going back to this wholeness, this love, this grace. When you're there, relationships are entirely reconciled because you have understanding. You have understanding of why it was that they were so terrible to you, or you have an understanding of their limitations, and they were doing the best they could, like we all do. And with that understanding, again, comes incredible grace, and the relationship is fully reconciled.
It's interesting. It's like in our conscious minds, it's really our mortal conscious minds. It's a little hard to fathom, but it's interesting that it could happen. And you're right. You hear that from anyone who's had a near-death experience. You hear that same kind of thing over and over again.
Yep, it's all about love, and I think that's why I wrote the second book, and that's really my passion now, is to try to inspire people and motivate people to actually try to prove me wrong, but to go back and look at their lives and really try to see if God really is real and present, because I believe it's going back and looking at your own life and seeing God's handprint that allows you to make this transformation from hoping or maybe believing that God's promises are true to this absolute trust.
Yeah, you give like a 4-step program that's 4 steps. 4 steps, it's like kind of like okay, here are 4 steps, prove it to yourself.
Right. And again, it's, it doesn't work for everyone, but it's, everyone has their own way, but it's one way that has worked for many people, because it's that transformation to trust that does many things. Number one, it gives you a sense of joy that transcends circumstances. But as we talk about, blocks and obstacles to reconciling with loved ones and all those sorts of things, and sort of putting the conscious mind or the intellectual mind aside, it's that trust that allows you to accept the truth of those promises. And you don't always need to know how it works. You don't always need to know why it's going to work or why you didn't get that job, but you can have an absolute trust that there is reconciliation, that there is love, that there is grace, and that there is a plan that's greater than what you had in mind.
And go ahead, Mary, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, that's something that for us Victory Chicks in midlife, it's that whole idea of wanting to figure out our purpose. It becomes more important to us in midlife. And,
absolutely.
And then we also think about our legacy, and you talk about that God has a plan, but and that we have to discover it. Well, Mary, how do we discover it if we're not figuring it out? What do we do?
Well, there are a number of things, and going back to your comment about the obstacles to our discovering it, or the obstacles to our developing trust, there are some really clear obstacles to finding what you're meant to do or finding where God is leading you, not the least of which is that God usually doesn't lead us down a path that's really easy and fun and we feel perfectly qualified for. We're usually challenged, because it's with challenge that we grow and change. It's not doing the same old thing. And so many of us want to do something great, or we want to do someone else's job, instead of saying, okay, I will say yes to wherever you're going to lead me, and that leading may be to, cleaning up at a soup kitchen. I mean, it may not be something grand or glorious, but in the process of that, you will discover oftentimes hidden talents or hidden pleasures. And I oftentimes tell people, look, if you can't figure out where you think you're being led, then take a step in any direction. And if you are going in the direction that's in line with God's will for your life or God's plan, you will receive confirmation. And, nobody, if you just sit in your chair, nothing ever happens. But you have to actually step out, it's that quote, step out in faith and wait for confirmation. Because if you're going down a path that God has set for you, everything sort of seems to happen really easily. But if you're going in a direction and everything is a struggle, you're probably not going the right way. It's sort of like that game Hot or Colder. You take a couple steps forward and you're either getting hotter or colder. And that's what I mean when I say you look for confirmation. And if you receive confirmation, you keep going.
But that doesn't mean. But when you say that you get confirmation, and I'm thinking of an experience I've had over the past year, where it's been kind of an uphill climb each step of the way, and yet at the same time I kept getting nudges. I kept getting nudges to keep moving forward with that particular project.
Well, I think that's the key, though, is if you're getting nudges, if you keep feeling yourself being drawn that direction or pushed that direction or led that direction, then those are points of confirmation. You know, I think that so many people listen to an opportunity or hear of something and they just immediately say no. I don't have the time, the skill, the whatever.
Right.
And they keep saying no. But if you start being presented this same opportunity in all kinds of different arenas, you know, you have to start paying attention to it. I know that for myself, I am always evaluating whether at this moment in time I am doing what God would have me be doing. And part of that is with every opportunity, I don't say yes to every opportunity that comes up in my life, but with each thing that piques my interest or with each thing that is presented, I always sort of look at it and momentarily evaluate, okay, is this for me? I mean, am I being drawn to this? And I'm always sort of aware of what's happening. And I think part of this issue of trust and part of the end result of going through the process of developing trust is increasing your awareness. Because once you start to realize that, wow, God really is present and active, then you start looking around and your awareness level changes and you start seeing miracles. Not everything is a miracle, of course, but you start seeing miracles occur. You start seeing and feeling those nudges and you start responding.
I believe that, and you know, Mary, I tell my Victory Chicks community, it's if you think it's going to be that the waters are going to part and you're just going to walk across without any challenges, the fact of the matter is that if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get what you already got.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so you have to. So it's some of those challenges that help make those shifts inside that help you keep moving.
Yeah, we can always look back at ourselves from 15 years ago, and we can look back and say, wow, I've really changed. But none of us have the ability to imagine how we will change 15 years into the future. But we change in response to challenges, struggles, change. And it's never when you do the same thing and the situation's always the same. It's always when things are changing.
Interesting. Now, Mary, listen, I've had an experience that so many of my listeners I know have had, and when a loved one is in a coma or unconscious, and my father was in a coma for about 5 months before he passed, and my mother was not in a coma, but she was unconscious. And there are stories about from people who have had those same experiences. Sometimes they're in a coma for years, and then they wake up and want pancakes as though nothing happened.
Right, exactly.
So but the one thing that I used to think about, especially with my father, because it was months, I used to think, well, where is he? Where did he?
Right.
Do you have any idea? Do you have any insight into that, given your experience?
Well, I don't have any direct experience that would be able to definitively say one thing or the other, but I certainly think that there's definitely the possibility, and there are other people who would say this happened to them. There's certainly the possibility that their spirit, their being, is sometimes there and sometimes not. Is sometimes, off in the spiritual world. But I don't have any direct experience with it. I don't know.
Well, listen, of your 7 lessons, do you have a favorite?
Oh, gosh. Well, I love them all because they are all profound in their own ways. But I really think that the one that I like the best, because everything else sort of keys off of it, is the fact that God is real and present and loves us more than we have any ability to understand. I mean, if we understood how loved we are, it in itself would be radically life-changing. And if we reflected even a little bit of that love to the world every day, the world would be a radically different place.
I could understand that.
Yeah, I mean, even a smile. Think about how changed a person's day is, or how changed a person's feelings are when you give them a smile. And a smile is, nothing on the scale of love. But all you have to do is reflect a little bit of love to someone, and it's like sunshine to a flower.
I think about that one time I was in the dollar store, and I was having a really bad day, and I walked up to the counter, and the person behind the counter said, "Hi, sweetheart, how can I help you?" Boy, that changed my entire outlook.
It's shocking, isn't it?
It was shocking.
A little bit of love. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that may be, you know what, on any given day for some people, that may be the most that they can do is smile at another human. But that one smile has ripple effects that you have no idea of.
Interesting.
Because that one smile changes that person's life for that moment at least.
And you're right, and that does happen because the next person I talked to didn't get the crappy person that
exactly right
that I was before I walked into the dollar store.
Right, and that's part of this understanding of the total interconnectedness of the universe, of all of us. Every action, every reaction, everything we say to other human beings, and I might add, animals, plants, etc., has consequences and has an effect. And we can reflect God's love or not.
Mary, thank you so much for coming to Happy Hour. We have to. I'm so sad that we have to say goodbye, but I have to say that your book brought me to tears more than once. Nice job, as an author myself. Nice job.
Thank you.
Tell my
thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Tell my listeners how they can get a copy.
Well, of course, it's anywhere books are sold. So certainly places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but also local bookstores. I think even Walmart and places like that sell the book.
And I posted a link to Amazon, to your book at Amazon on the radio wrap up at victoriouswoman.com.
Great.
Thank
you
Mary.
So much, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
I think you bless a lot of people.
Oh, thank you. I know that you do also. Thank you very much. Have a fabulous weekend.
Thank you, and you also.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So listen, Victory Chicks, and you guys, what do you have on tap for the weekend? My biggest job is finding a new car, and you know how it is when you don't have wheels, so I'm itchy. But now, listening to Dr. Mary Neal, I'm thinking, but there must be some purpose for me not having a car these couple of days. But listen, by next week, I'm hoping to have a new car. And the good thing is, since I drive stick, there aren't a lot to choose from because stick isn't very popular, so I kind of have it narrowed down to my choices were something like the Chevy Cruze, the Mazda 3, the Honda Civic, and the Subaru Impreza, but I've narrowed it down to the Cruze and the Mazda. So so tonight and tomorrow I'm working on the car. And, but tomorrow, listen to this, crazy stuff. Joseph and I are having Joseph's cousins over for dinner. And that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is, because we're looking forward to seeing them. But the crazy part is that we were invited to the book launch for a new coffee table book called Ardrossan, The Last Great Estate on Philadelphia Main Line by David Nelson Wren. The launch party is in Villanova at Ardrossan from 4 to 7, and our guests, so that's the launch party. Joseph's cousins are coming at 6:30. So this week, I've been trying to figure out my car situation, the dinner guests, and I've been trying to figure out how we can get ready for our guests, still get to Ardrossan, and come back to enjoy our cousin's company. And I wouldn't make myself crazy for just anybody, but I would do it for the lovely Joan Mackey, whose grandparents owned Ardrossan. And you might recall that that Joan gave Joseph and me a private tour of Ardrossan last spring. Well, Joan told us wonderful stories about her Ardrossan experience. But listen, if you're a Downton Abbey fan, Ardrossan is our Highclere Castle. Well, okay, it's not quite a castle, but it's close as we come in the U.S., and that's why I'm telling you that it's the heyday. The heyday of Ardrossan was the same time period as Downton Abbey. with the same social status and color and cultural mores. So most of the book signings are in Wayne, but if you're interested, there's one fairly close to here in Wayne at Main Point Books. It's on Sunday from 4 to 6. So if you like that kind of stuff, to hear the author talking about his experiences with putting the book together, it's this Sunday, 4 to 6, Main Point Books. And, listen, Radnor Historical Society is giving a tour of Ardrossan on November 8th, and they might still have tickets. So that's Radnor Historical Society, and the links are in the radio wrap-up. If you love Downton Abbey, I'm telling you, going through Ardrossan is like walking around the set of Downton Abbey. When you put some of those stories in historical context, like, for example, Grace Kelly, who the Philadelphia Story and High Society were both movies based on one of the kids who lived at Ardrossan. Grace Kelly played the privileged main character in High Society, but in real life, Grace Kelly could not have had a High Society coming out party because she was Catholic. So apparently those debutante coming out parties were Protestant things. And what's so funny now, 50 years later, is that the whole debutante thing is different and coming out parties have a whole other meaning. So listen, it's just looking at the clock. It's time for us to go. Thanks for joining me for Happy Hour today. And for this week, I'll leave you with this quote from Helen Keller, one that Dr. Mary Neal used as a chapter quote in her book. And it's this: "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." I hope you live this whole weekend in your heart energy. And please come back next week. I'll look forward to talking with you then. Jensan.
Thanks for listening to this Friday Happy Hour. Make sure you subscribe, rate and review today's show. And join us again next week for the Friday Happy Hour with Annmarie Kelly.